Hey, it's Matt from the Direct-to-Video Connoisseur here. Thanks again for listening to the DTVC podcast. Before we jump in, I wanted to quickly let you know that my new novel, A Girl and a Gun, is available on Amazon now, both on Kindle and paperback. It follows Justin, a successful writer whose past as a scriptwriter for a fetish porn site comes back to haunt him and threatens to derail his career. As he's picking up the pieces, he gets an opportunity to make a movie called A Girl and a Gun with a rom-com star. Justin may have bitten off more than he can chew, though, because she's notoriously difficult to work with. If you're interested, you can find the link on our webpage, along with the link to my first novel, Chad in Accounting. If you have any questions, please reach out, and I thank you for the support. Now, on to the podcast.
Welcome back to the Direct-to-Video Connoisseur podcast. As always, this is Matt here, and this week I am rolling solo. That sounded really bad. I'm going solo. I guess I sounded like some bro hanging out in Vegas. I'm rolling solo this weekend, man. But no, I didn't end up getting a guest for this episode. It was kind of a two-part issue. The first was that I was away for work. When I came back, I wasn't on top of reaching out to guests like I should have. And I didn't want to lose this space here because I feel like we've been building some momentum with the podcast by doing, a podcast every 2 weeks, like we've been doing. So that was one thing. But the other thing was that I've recently moved the podcast from TalkShoe to Anchor FM. And that's kind of a big thing just because I think I'm maybe one of the last holdouts of our blogging community that was still using TalkShoe. I'm hoping it's going to mean a lot of good things for the podcast. But the main issue is that I was afraid in putting this first podcast up that there might be some issues in putting it on uploading the first one to Anchor. And so I think there was a concern of I don't want to say, if I had a guest on and maybe they were promoting a book, movie, their own podcast, their own site, and they're on and the podcast isn't uploaded properly for whatever reason, as I'm sort of working out the new system, at least it's only affecting me in that case. And so that was another reason why I was kind of happy that maybe this is a good one to have as being a solo one. And going forward, of course, I do have a couple guests lined up for the next couple episodes, and I'm going to try to keep rolling with that. I mean, we're already into October, and at least I've been able to manage roughly every 2 weeks doing a podcast episode. Sometimes it's 15 days, sometimes it's 13 days, but pretty much every 14 days, every other Tuesday, we've been able to get a podcast episode up, which is something I've been happy about, that I've been able to do this starting in January of this year. So pretty much through the year. So I don't want to jinx it and run into a situation where I don't do that, but at least to this point, we've managed to make that happen. And that's something that I'm really happy about, because in the past, I wasn't always good, right, about keeping material going, always, getting episodes up, getting blog posts up. I mean, that's the other thing. I think I'll have to go back and check, but I think this year, for the most part, we've done a blog post every weekend. Try to do them on Saturdays, but I think we've been able to manage that as well. And then, of course, the other piece is that the Tuesdays that I don't do podcasts, trying to find material for those. And so sometimes it'll be like a new letterbox list. It might be more of an indie type review where maybe somebody sends me a screener and I review the blog, review a movie there. That's what I've been using sometimes for that second Tuesday of the month, or that second Tuesday that doesn't have a blog post. So that's the other thing too, is trying to find content for these every other Tuesday ones where we don't have a podcast. And so I was thinking about maybe even doing solo podcasts for those as well. But, when we ran into this situation where I didn't have a guest for this episode, moving the podcast to Anchor, I thought, why don't we just do it solo and put it up that way? So at least you still have content. And, then we'll kick back with co-hosts or, with guests coming up from there. I mean, that's the other thing too, right? Is that the podcast doesn't have a co-host anymore. I mean, when I first started, I had Jamie as a co-host, and it was great. She was really great on the podcast, and I think people really enjoyed our interactions. The problem was that as our lives were kind of moving on, it it was harder and harder for us to coordinate times. And when I got back into doing the podcast, because I went on hiatus in 2015. When I came back in, I was worried about either asking her or somebody else to be co-host on the podcast with me, with the fear that I wouldn't be able to keep up with it. And so I think this has been something to prove to myself too, that I can put content out every other week. I know, like, for example, the guys at Comeuppance, what's great, right, is that because the two of them work in tandem, they can make sure they've got a podcast every 1st and 15th, which I think is really cool. And again, it builds momentum, right? Because as someone myself who consumes a lot of podcasts, it's great to know that if I'm subscribed to something, that I'm going to get content every couple weeks or every week, or whatever it is. And who knows, maybe we get to that point where we can do every week. I don't know if we're going to be there yet, but kind of I don't want to get carried away. I think once a week is definitely good. So with that in mind, right, is this going to be this being a solo episode with me just talking? I kind of wanted to go off the paradigm that I created in June when I did the Atkins Fest podcast, where I had watched 4 Atkins movies and thought, why don't I just chat about those 4 Atkins movies and get into those? And I thought maybe a good subject for this would be Bruce Willis movies. You may remember late last year, I had Sean Malloy from I Must Break This podcast on, and we talked about Precious Cargo and kind of talked about the overall Bruce Willis movie situation. And I think Sean used the expression, he's pissing on his legacy. And I think that's kind of an important thing, right, when it comes to Bruce Willis, is that realizing how big of a star he is, right? I mean, when you go to IMDb and you type in BRU, Bruce Willis is the name that comes up. He was a unique star, or I shouldn't say was, right? I mean, he still is a unique star, but I think was when I think of in the past, right? He did Moonlighting, right? So a show that was like kind of comedy, part romance, some action as well. Really fun show that I remember. I think it was on Monday nights. I love the theme song, but it was a show that I remember my mom watched, and so I would watch it with her as a kid, and always thought it was really great. And he was a big reason why it was so great. I mean, he was very charismatic, but yet could be gruff and tough, and the kind of action lead. And he kind of was able to branch out and do a lot of different parts from there, right? Like he was doing, we remember him in Die Hard, of course, doing the action roles, but then he could also do more fun, offbeat romantic comedies. He could do Blake Edwards movies. Then, of course, doing films with Quentin Tarantino, doing something like 12 Monkeys, or The Sixth Sense. He really was able to do a lot of different things. And he was really, as a star, I mean, he was one of the biggest names out there. We don't always think of that necessarily now, right? But at the time, I mean, Bruce Willis was a topper, someone who could headline a film and get something in the theater. And it was kind of like one of those things, like, what are the Bruce Willis movies that are coming out this year? At the same time, he would do a lot of these indie flicks as well that maybe you didn't know about, that you'd go back in. I remember he did an adaptation of Billy Bathgate with Dustin Hoffman that I didn't even know about. I was reading Billy Bathgate, and I was like, oh, look at this. There was a movie made off of this. So when we started into the DTV realm, and we started to see these films, especially these Emmett Furla productions, there was a sense of like, what's going on here? Like, what is he doing? And it was almost a feeling of like, wow, he's making just these horrible movies when he made so many great films before. He's just trying to cash a paycheck or something. We since found out, of course, that he's suffering with aphasia, and that there was almost a sense of maybe if he could make as many movies as possible before he had to retire, right? That was kind of the idea. And I think looking at it through that lens, you think, okay, so maybe I can view these movies in a different way. I think before I viewed them as this like assembly line kind of thing. It's very like cynical the way it was made. There's a very cynical vibe about them. Like, let's just put crap out there with Willis's picture on the cover, and who cares how much he's in the film? People are going to stream it. They're going to rent it. They'll get it on Redbox. They'll buy it, whatever, just because Willis's name is on there. And I think even for me in the sort of the blogging review ecosystem, there was almost a sense too of like Willis's name brings people in. So, better to do a review of a Willis film and get people on Twitter and Facebook or whatever wanting to read and see what I thought of this movie than, I don't know, than somebody, maybe like a Gary Daniels, right, who only kind of maybe the core hardcore action fans really know. And I think that was part of it with Willis. It was almost a siren song thing where, we got to do as many of these Willis films as we can. So at a certain point, of course, you get to a point where you can't do these Willis movies because they were difficult, and there was, again, with that cynicism and that mindset, I didn't want to play into it at all. And then finding out that there was maybe a more benevolent reason for why he was doing these films. And again, we don't know how much that is, right? We don't know how much it was helping him out so that he could get as much money for him, or how much it was, the producers with Emmett and Furla trying to get as many movies with him in them as that, so they can get them out there and make money off of them, right? It's, is it? I think Sean Malloy used the expression because he was looking at one of the trailers where Bruce Willis looks like he was having trouble. Like it's Ed Wood, kind of propping up Bela Lugosi, right, towards the end there. And is that what we're seeing with those movies? And I don't know. And I kind of want to give them the benefit of the doubt and see it from the mindset of like, yeah, trying to get Bruce Willis in as much as he can before he can't make any more money. That could be an important thing. So looking at it from that lens, right, then you're kind of seeing it as like, okay, well, what are the times when, how do they mitigate the fact that they can't have as much Willis in the movie? Or how do they mitigate the fact that he's not going to do his ADR, or those kinds of things. What are the constructs that they use in the movie to sort of get around those things? And it can be a little bit fascinating to view it from that lens. And so I went into this idea of doing a mini Bruce Willis Film Fest and talking about it here in the solo podcast with that idea that I was going to have fun with it and see how much we could do, how many of these little things that we could pick out, or just maybe kind of watch it for the co-stars, because there's always like a lot of co-stars in these movies as well. So that was my mindset, and I had in mind that I was going to do 4 of these movies. But when I get to the first one, the first of the 4, the first that I watched was Vendetta. I was like, boy, this is a bit of a slog. The movie was definitely, like, the pacing felt off. I'm 15 minutes in, and I feel like I'm a half hour in. I'm a half hour in, I feel like I'm an hour in, and I've got still however much left to go. And I thought, okay, I don't know if I can do 3 of these. And then I did the next one with Out of Death, and then it really hit me like, boy, this is tough. This is going to be tough to do. And so I cut myself down to 3 films. So the 3, are going to be Vendetta, Out of Death, and Hard Kill, which was on Netflix. So the other 2 are on Hulu, and then the last one was on Netflix. So those are the 3 that I watched that I'm going to talk about. And I thought maybe, I was trying to figure out what order I would do them in. And I thought maybe I wanted to do them descending order by amount of words in the title. So Out of Death being 3 words. I mean, I guess Vendetta has 3 syllables, right? So it's the same amount of syllables as Out of Death. So as an aside, does anybody remember when Jim Carrey was trying to give Will Smith a hard time at the Video Music Awards? They were kind of like, giving each other some good-natured ribbing. And I think Jim Carrey said something along the lines of like, because I think Bruce Willis tried to kiss, or not Bruce Willis, Will Smith tried to kiss him, and Jim Carrey's like, 1 word, 2 syllables, breath ashore. And I was in a group of people who were laughing about that, and I was like, but isn't breath ashore 2 words and 3 syllables? And nobody found that part funny. So yeah, nobody likes a grammar hammer. So just an aside there. But yeah, why don't we get stuck in these films, and I'll chat about them here, and kind of go from there. So the first one is Out of Death. And of course, the title to me just was the first thing that made me really, really interested in this. The idea of, I guess I think they were supposed to mean out of in the sense of from, but I saw it as out of as in you're, out of stock of something. And the idea of that, like, oh, honey, I got to go to the store because we're all out of death, right? Or, oh man, the store just can't keep death stocked, right? They're just out of death all the time. And just that concept. The other piece, of course, is the Air Supply song, All Out of Love. I kept getting that in my head too. Like, I'm all out of death. I'm so lost without you. Like that. I kept getting that song in my head as a result. So a lot of goofy things happening here. Unfortunately, the movie doesn't really live up to that so much. So just to kind of give you a brief synopsis of it, you've got Jamie King in the lead role. She's a woman who is playing someone 10 years younger than herself, whose father passed away, and she needs to bring his ashes to a spot on a mountain. And he essentially dared her when he was living, saying, you're not going to make it up to that spot. So she's sort of taking the dare to go up there. So she's going up to that mountain. At the same time, Bruce Willis is a retired police officer, and he has a niece who lives near the mountain, has a nice house, like a cabin near the mountain. So he's staying there in the cabin, and he is going for a walk out in the woods. And then we have some corrupt sheriffs or corrupt sheriff's deputies, and one of them, played by Lala Kent, who I found out subsequently is famous for being on Vanderpump Rules. She plays a sheriff who is hooking up with this meth cooker or something along those lines, and finds out he's been taping her in all of their interactions. So she gets out of the pickup truck that they're in, and she shoots him. And well, Jamie King catches her shooting him, and films it. So now the hunt is on, right? They need to catch him. So there's another co-star that's working with Jamie King, another one of the deputies. Let's see if I can get his name here, because he's in a lot of these Emmett Furla films, and I probably should have had it already up and ready to go. Tyler John Olson is his name, and so I've seen him in a lot of these movies. He just sort of makes the rounds, and so he's playing this deputy who's there, like trying to clean up the mess that Lala Kent created. Um, he looks different in a lot of the movies. In this one, he looks like a cross between, I don't know, Don Swayze and Splinter, maybe. It's really interesting. And so they're, sort of out there, and they find Jamie King, and they're kind of going to execute her, right? They're bringing her somewhere to kill her, when Bruce Willis happens upon her, and he holds the two sheriffs at gunpoint. Jamie King escapes, and then Bruce Willis and her escape together, and they kind of rendezvous. It's sort of the whole cat and mouse thing, right? They catch them, they don't catch them. And with Bruce Willis's character, because he can't be in the film for that long, right? It can't be a situation where Jamie King and Bruce Willis are both trying to escape. He needs to separate from her and go do his own thing so he can be out of the picture for a while. The interesting thing, though, is that Jamie King also was out of the picture for a while, and a lot of the movie is really Lala Kent and Tyler John Olson doing things, which is weird, right? Like, I think any movie that spends too much time on the baddies is not going to be a good movie. Again, the pacing was all off on this one. This was another one where it was like the first 15 minutes, a bunch of stuff happens, and then we go 20, 30 minutes with it kind of just slows down, and they start padding the films out a lot. I got a sense too that this wanted to go in a Coen Brothers route. That each there was 4 sections of the film that each had chapter titles, so it was 4 chapters. They'd play banjo music here or there, kind of offbeat, sort of southern type stuff, to really give you this down home feel that it's sort of like some down home chicanery that's going on here. And so between the music and the chapters and the fact again that we lose Willis for huge chunks of time, but also lose Jamie King for a huge chunk of time, it's kind of hard to sort of stay engaged. It was a hard one for me to stay engaged with. Again, I was looking for a lot of the fun, and it's hard because it's even the things that I thought I was going to have fun with, when Jamie King is standing there with Bruce Willis, and then they separate, and I thought, okay, well, this is fun, right? Because this is the plot point that they're using, or this is what the device they're using to get Bruce Willis out of the way, because it made no sense that the two of them separated, right? They had no reason to separate, or I mean, the reason that they gave wasn't a good one. It was something like Bruce Willis was going to get something back at the bungalow, and he wanted her to go find the camera that had the information on it, and they just sort of meet and come, they leave and come back. But what I realized is that kind of thing only works so much because Bruce Willis spends so much time out of the film that when he disappears, right, it's okay, well, he's there, and then it's okay, what are they going to use to get him out of the scene from there? So you don't really get many instances of them doing that, and I didn't really consider that part of it, that he's just going to, when he goes, right, he's gone for 20 or 30 minutes, so you only get 3 or 4 moments of how they get him in and out of the film, and use plot devices so he's not having to film that much. So there was that one piece of it there. I think, I don't know, I think the other thing with Bruce Willis is I could tell that he was struggling a little bit in some of the scenes, and that was a little bit kind of hard to watch. I think, he was doing the best that he could, but I think there were some of those issues there. And I think as good a job as the production company and everybody making the film did to try to mask some of those things, you could see it when it was happening. And I think that part of it, to me, made me feel more sympathetic. And all of the issues that I had with the film, seeing Willis, kind of doing his best with it to try to put this role together, that part I felt more sympathy for him, which again, it's not a fun thing, right? It's not a fun, happy thing that I'm experiencing when I'm doing that. I'm more kind of just feeling bad. So there's that part of it as well. And then I think, again, I think the thing that hits me about all of these movies is, again, I'll go back to the pacing, but there's a lot of padding in the movies as well. And this one in particular really had it because it seemed like Jamie King wasn't in the film that as much either. And she was kind of the co-star. Usually with these movies, right, it's Bruce Willis and then like a younger male lead who's doing the heavy lifting. So you think of Precious Cargo, right? You've got Mark Paul Gosselaar. You think one that we'll be talking about later, Hard Kill, right? It's Jesse Metcalf. Just trying to think of all the different names that come up. These I think with Cole Hauser, right? And what was that? Active Violence? Is that what it was called? Something like that. Yeah, I mean, even just thinking about like Vice, right, where you had Thomas Jane was even though he's not that much younger, he again doing more of the heavy lifting. So this didn't really have that part. I guess Jamie King was supposed to be that part, but even she wasn't in it enough to be like the Mark Paul Gosselaar part. I do like the idea of that, though, in theory, that you could have, because I think a movie that did that really well was Altitude with Dolph Lundgren and Denise Richards, where Denise Richards is the she's kind of the more of the action lead, and Dolph is taking a little bit more of a step back and letting her do that. Another one, I guess, would be Acceleration, right, with Natalie Byrne, kind of the same idea. So it's not that you couldn't do it with a female lead. I think just Jamie King might not have been the right one. For whatever reason, she wasn't in the film as much either. So that was another part of it that didn't work for me. And again, it's the movies that are slog. I mean, we think of like the Philippine action film, right, with the jungle slog. I mean, this was like out in the woods slog. And again, they just sort of just walking in the woods a lot, talking about things a lot. Every once in a while, somebody gets stabbed, somebody gets shot. They got to patch up the wound, use a belt to tie off the tourniquet or whatever, and get back in there. And then same thing, walk around, talk in the woods, have conversations, and then somebody gets stabbed. And you can only kind of see that thing happen so much. I think another thing that I say a lot in my blog post, maybe I'll finish up with this piece before we move on to the next film. Something I say a lot in my blog posts lately is that a lot of movies have about enough material for one episode of a syndicated action show. And this one really was that. I would say for the hour and a half, and I don't know what the runtime was, it was a little bit over 90 minutes, I believe. It was, let's see here if it says, 96 minutes. So for a 96-minute film, I think 42, 43 minutes worth would have gotten you there. And I think all of these Bruce Willis films, really, I mean, you could have made like a Bruce Willis syndicated TV show with all of his movies that are in there and just cut them all down to 43-minute episodes. And it would have been a really cool series. And this one really, I think maybe more than any of them really, really drives that home, that it really could have been cool. Like if Bruce Willis was playing a police officer who is in all of these movies as a police officer, and he just shows up and, whatever happens for 43 minutes like this. I would have actually liked this episode. I would have liked it as an episode with the characters they had in it and the way they did it. But to stretch it out to 96 minutes, that's when it starts to get difficult to manage. And I think that's what happened here. All right, so next up is Hard Kill. So we're going from 3 words in the title down to 2. And this one was on Netflix. It's been on Netflix for a while, I think. And it's one that I've always kind of saw. I mean, it's only been on there for a couple of years. It feels like it's been there longer. But it's one that I've seen and I thought, okay, this could be an interesting one. But by the same token, I've just never had the energy to do it. So this one, again, it's on Netflix. I think compared to the other ones, it has more of the critic reviews, and I think that's another piece there, right? That you look at Out of Death has 27 critic reviews, Vendetta has 13, Hard Kill has 47 critic reviews, and I think 2020 was still a period where it hadn't hit the breaking point yet with the Bruce Willis movies. That people were still like, I got to get in there and I got to review these, and more people were still reviewing them. And I mean, I think at that time too, you remember you had Todd Gaines from Bulletproof, who was almost like the chronicler of the Bruce Willis film. And he was like doing the yeoman's work of reviewing all of them for Bulletproof Action. And I think in 2020 there was still enough of a push to want to keep doing these. Then 2021, and more recently, people had kind of just it hit the tipping point. People had enough of them. So this is an interesting one thinking about that, because again, it's a year. This one came out in 2020, whereas the other one that we did that I just talked about, Out of Death, came out in 2021. So we're still in that mode of like, okay, oh, it's a Bruce Willis movie. We got to check it out. We've got to see it. You got to see what happens in it. With this one, right, we've got Jesse Metcalf, who plays the guy doing the heavy lifting. So this one actually follows the paradigm a little bit closer, where Willis is in it as this main character. In this case, usually it's a rich businessman, or it's a rich crime lord or something like that, or it's a police officer. But yeah, in this case, he's a rich businessman, and his daughter, played by Lala Kent, so she's back in this one, or I guess she was back in the other one, right? Because that one came after. But she plays the daughter, and she has access to this really like fancy computer program that essentially can shut off all electronics in the world. And she gives it to this terrorist known as the Partner. And so once that's happened, Bruce Willis's friend, who was friends with Jesse Metcalf and in Iraq, tricks Jesse Metcalf and his group of, like, I guess, mercenaries that he works with to take on this case, to sort of get this to sort of protect Bruce Willis. And the idea is they go to an abandoned building somewhere. Bruce Willis is bait, which draws the Partner and Lala Kent out, because the Partner needs Bruce Willis. He needs his access code to be able to use the program. So that's the issue. And then, of course, you get kind of the siege in the building, the cat and mouse thing again, right, which we had in Out of Death, and sort of people double cross each other. Things aren't always what they seem, but then they are what they seem. Oh, maybe the Partner has the program and he's going to be able to destroy things. Oh, nope, he doesn't, and it's all over. And everybody wins and they live happily ever after. Now, again, this is another one with a lot of padding. I mean, I think right away, Jesse Metcalf gets into a limo with Bruce Willis and the other character's name. I think his name was Texas Battle. Let me see, it was Texas something. Texas Battle, yeah. So Texas Battle is the old Iraq friend. So they're in a limo trying to sell Jesse Metcalf on him and his team doing this job. And I mean, it felt like they were talking in that limo for 20 minutes. It was just a long slog of a scene. But also, I want to say it was almost a half hour before we had any action, which is different, right? From at least in Out of Death, we did get some action sooner than that in the film. And I think that brings up another big point for me, where it's like, why can't these films just follow the PM paradigm, right, of an action sequence every 10 to 15 minutes? And I guess it's because action sequences cost money, right? And so you can't have action all the time because it costs a lot of money. So it's a lot cheaper just to have Jesse Metcalf, Texas Battle, and Bruce Willis in a limo just talking for 20 minutes than it is to have a car flipped over or something like that. But what that means is it can be a slog for us. And this definitely was. I mean, if the previous one we talked about, Out of Death, was a wooded area mountain slog, this was an abandoned building slog, right? This was the old warehouse slog. And again, I think the problem with a movie like this is that to only have one location, to have everything set in one location, to get 93 minutes out of it is difficult, right? You really need to I think this is, again, it's the 43-minute movie rule, or 43-minute episode of a syndicated TV show rule. And this one, definitely, the padding, you could feel it. The plot twists that they just sort of inserted in here and there to just sort of keep things, plugging along, instead of just wrapping things up when they could have sooner. This was definitely that. It was harder. Once the movie gets stuck in, there is action, and that's a little bit better. But again, the action is kind of just like, the baddies are all these guys with, like, ski helmets and masks on, shooting, assault rifles. And so it's just like a lot of people just all lined up behind, like, pillars and various, debris, and just firing weapons and yelling at each other, and hey, you good, like, you get my six, cover me, I'm gonna, and it's like that kind of thing works, but you can't do it too much, right? Because we've seen it so many times, and also a lot of times it doesn't seem to get anywhere, right? It's like just people shooting at each other, and you're like, okay, when is somebody going to hit somebody? And then eventually, like, one of the heroes, stands up completely uncovered with their pistol out, and they start taking people out, and you're like, oh, okay, all right. So you could have done that like 20 minutes ago, but you decided to wait. I think talking about Jesse Metcalf as the guy doing the heavy lifting, I mean, we're talking about someone who, I mean, from a star standpoint, I think there's been a shift after Born Identity to get more guys like this into action roles. I think Ryan Phillippe is a really great example. I think the difference between Ryan Phillippe and Jesse Metcalf is Ryan Phillippe has more range as an actor. And I think that's one of the biggest problems with these movies. And I'm going to get into it in the next one here with Vendetta as well, is that we often get these one note heroes as the ones who are doing the heavy lifting. And that was a really big problem, I think, with this one, was that Jesse Metcalf, really all he's doing is just like, grimacing, scowling through his beard. But he doesn't really have any personality to speak of. They don't give his character much. And you see that a lot in these Bruce Willis ones, that whoever it is that's doing the heavy lifting, their character doesn't have a lot of personality. I mean, Mark Paul Gosselaar, he brought a little bit more personality. He was kind of like the roguish thief kind of guy, so there was a little bit more to work with there. But even there, it's like he gets to this point where he's angry and just grimacing and scowling all the time through his beard. Again, they all have to be bearded, and they all scowl and grimace a lot. And Jesse Metcalf does that a lot here. But there's also that sense of like, man, you were kind of like, kind of a nice looking, like, teen romantic, romantic movie lead kind of person. I think he's on a nighttime soap now. I think that's one of the other things he does. And so it's hard to try to sell these guys as action leads, because it's almost like they have to contrive the whole hard man thing with them. And here it definitely felt contrived. And I think, if they'd given his character more personality, maybe it would have worked. Maybe we would have enjoyed him. And I think that's the thing with Ryan Phillippe, where he's doing these parts, is that sometimes he's allowed to inject more personality into the role, and we can buy it more. I think if they're going to use, and it looks like Jesse Metcalf is getting used in a lot of these kinds of movies now. I think if they're going to do it more, I think, yeah, definitely. I mean, I'm not saying necessarily you have to lose the beard, but the beard just seems to be like a common thing, right? They're just all with these bearded guys who just look angry all the time and just like tired and worn out and everything. And yeah, I don't know. I mean, just, give me a nice Dolph Lundgren, like cracking jokes and beating guys up and having nice fun one-liners and all of that. I think I dig that more, and it makes the movie more compelling, right? That I'm more willing to kind of sit there, because especially if it's like this, where you're going to dump Bruce Willis for huge chunks of the film, we need somebody to carry us through. Another piece that this thing does is, I think the villain, the partner character, in some ways he's better, right? Because he has a little bit more personality than the rest of them. But even he kind of just, I don't know, he's like quoting Canterbury Tales, and it's like talking about how he I think the film didn't really have the range to get into the political stuff that his character was supposed to be into, so that was kind of left like half managed. So even there, you didn't even have like a Destro effect to lean on, right? Because as a baddie, he wasn't even that cool. He was cool, but not that cool, right? As Vin Diesel said in Triple X. So even that kind of doesn't work. So again, you're left with this kind of slog where you've got huge chunks of padding. You've got people just patching up wounds again. Same thing as the other one. It's just like, oh, I've been hit. Oh, I gotta put a belt around my shoulder, or somebody's got to pull the bullet out or whatever. Yeah, because you just more of that kind of thing too. It's just again, this one, I think maybe as much as maybe more so than the previous one, it had more of that cynicism to it, of just like, let's just throw all this stuff in here, put these names on the cover, and we'll get the Netflix streams. And to their credit, I mean, you're talking about 47 critic reviews, I think over 500 user reviews. So on some level, maybe being cynical myself, you almost can't fault them, right, for pulling this off the way they did, because it got the attention it got. But the question is, right, is that how many of us Charlie Browns are going to keep falling for Lucy pulling the football, right? And I think that's where you start to see the diminishing returns, is that, okay, we had the football pulled out from under us, or pulled out on us when we tried to kick it in this film. So the next time when I see Out of Depth, I'm not gonna, get fooled again, or the, Vendetta, or whatever the next movie is, unless you're me, right? And you're gonna put yourself through it for 3 in a row to do a blog post, or to do a podcast episode like this. So Yeah, so that was kind of that. I'm trying to think if there was anything else in there that really stood out for me. I think the Bruce Willis piece again too is you can also see maybe even the difference between the 2 years. I want to say that he's kind of more with it in this one. Again, his character is in very few locations. I mean, there's one scene in particular that really stood out for me. Is that so you've got the group, the mercenary group, and they're in a bar, and Jesse Metcalf is telling them, "Yeah, we're going to do this job," and some of them don't want to do it, some of them do, and they're like, "Okay, well, we're all going to go and do it." So then the next scene, they're walking into the warehouse area, and I noticed this tall, bald guy with like a kind of a thin coat on and scarf, and I'm like, who is he? And I thought I had overheard in the previous scene that they were talking about another member of their team who wasn't there, and I was like, oh, this must be that other member of the team who's not there. Well, it wasn't until they get into the warehouse area that I realized that that was supposed to be Bruce Willis. So they were doubling him with someone who was taller and thinner, and I mean, it looked like somebody completely different. I mean, it almost looked like the bad guy in I don't remember what Star Trek movie it was. It was the one where they had the Romulans, and then I think there's the Remus, or they had the other planet, right, and something like that. That's kind of what it looked like. Yeah, or yeah, I don't know, but it didn't look like Bruce Willis at all. It didn't even look close to Bruce Willis. And it's interesting because they mitigated that, for example, in the previous one, Out of Death, where there were scenes where like Bruce Willis's character was supposed to be rummaging around like in the drawers and things like that to find things, and they were just doing it from the chest down, so you couldn't see that it wasn't him, right? You couldn't tell. This was probably like the most egregious example of it definitely not being Willis and them just pawning it off as Willis. I don't even know who this person was, and yeah, so that was one that really stood out for me. But beyond that, I mean, there were a lot of scenes where Willis seemed like he was a little bit more there, more present. I mean, again, it's like the construct is Jesse Metcalf is like, oh, we need to put you in this area here so you're safe. And so it's just like, yeah, he's just going to go stand in this area, this like section of the warehouse with like nothing else to do, just stand there for huge chunks of the movie. And then he gets caught by that partner character. So now he's sitting with his hands like kind of zip tied in front of him on a chair, and just has lines every once in a while doing that. And then, he helps like the computer thing with Lala Kent. So yeah, not really a lot of locations there. And again, using a double that doesn't really look like him. So usually, like I said, that feels like it should be the fun of watching these movies, that you pick out things like that. It's just they happen so seldom because Willis's character is on screen so seldom. So you don't even have many opportunities to see a double because they've written his character out of it for so long. It's something that I didn't even consider getting into this, but it's definitely something that was the case there. All right, so let's get into the last one, Vendetta. So this movie came out here in 2022. There's something that was saying that this might be the last the movie that he shot. I don't know if that's the case or not. But the thing that really, really excited me about this movie was it's got Theo Rossi in it. And I am a huge Theo Rossi fan. I loved Theo Rossi in the Luke Cage series. I think it's one of my favorite things done by the Marvel Cinematic Universe. There's a 2-season series on Netflix. He played the character of Hernan or Shades. He was fantastic in that role. Of course, he did Sons of Anarchy. He does a lot of indie flicks. Just one of my favorite actors. I just love seeing him in stuff. And I was excited to see him in this and see what he did here. And he didn't disappoint in that sense. I mean, he didn't have great material to work with, but he was great as the baddie. And of course, knowing that he's going to be a baddie sets us up for a Destro effect, which we definitely had here. So anyway, I'll get into the plot here a little bit here. So Vendetta has the main character is played by Clive Standen. Not sure who he is. It looks like he's done other stuff before, but he's this dad again, like Jesse Metcalf. He's bearded, he's grimacing, he's scowling, all of that. His daughter is a young girl who's like a softball star. She's like playing softball in high school, and he's taking her home from a softball game. Stops to pick up burritos, leaves her in the car, and at the same time, Theo Rossi, whose dad Bruce Willis is like some major crime boss in the town that they live in. He is taking his younger brother to, I guess, commit his first murder as a way to sort of initiate himself into the gang. And the person that they kill is the daughter. So Clive Standen is, he's doesn't quite witness the crime because he's in messing around with the woman selling burritos, and he's not really paying attention. So he comes back out, sees his daughter getting killed, or he comes out right after she's been shot, and so he's not able to positively ID the killer. But then there's this really weird construct that the DA is like, oh, we're going to plea down to 7 years, which didn't make any sense. That's generally, I mean, that's like kind of this myth that we have that, criminals get off all the time for crimes. When I talked to friends who are defense attorneys, and they're like, yeah, it doesn't really work that way. People have been put away for a lot longer with a lot less evidence than what they had on this guy here. So there's that piece there. But anyway, Clive Standon's character decides that, well, instead of testifying for the plea deal, he's just going to say he never even saw him. So the guy gets acquitted. So then he can kill him himself. And he does. He beats him to death with a baseball bat, which then, of course, excites Rossi and Willis because they're upset that, their son and brother has been murdered. So then they go and kill Clive Standon's wife and shoot him a bunch of times. For whatever reason, they don't kill him, though, right? It doesn't really make any sense that they have multiple opportunities to kill him and they don't. So Clive Standon sort of rehabilitates himself, gets back in shape. He's a former Iraq vet, of course, as well. A lot of them are in these movies. And he meets up with Thomas Jane, who's kind of a Machine Gun Joe type character, sells him a bunch of weapons. He kind of has it in for Rossi and Willis as well, so he's willing to help Clive Standon do this. And then Clive Standon goes on his march to vengeance, right, or his vendetta, as it is, and goes and takes out the gang to get revenge for his dead wife and dead daughter. So yeah, again, Clive Standon, maybe even worse than Jesse Metcalfe, is just a total one note as the hero. It's again where they just don't give these guys any material. So it really is just this bearded guy, just grimacing. This bearded guy who's scowling, who's upset, crying sometimes, versus this Theo Rossi character who is just absolutely electric, right? Like one of the things I love is like he does this smile, this sort of like this sinister smile that it's almost like it kind of emerges on his face, and there's almost like a Joker-like quality to it. Like he would be a fantastic Joker, I think. Beyond like kind of these ideas that we have of what the Joker is supposed to be, I think he would be fantastic in it. And he's just really like just chewing up scenery all over the place. Just really like bringing this sort of this real method actor approach that he has. I mean, he's someone who fits in independent films. He's definitely a different level from what we're seeing in this movie. And it creates this massive Destro effect for me because I'm like, well, what do I care about this one note guy who's scowling all the time when I've got Theo Rossi over here who's just completely electric and just getting after it. And so that just completely hurt the film for me because now it's like I can't even root for this guy. I mean, at least in Hard Kill, I could kind of root for Jesse Metcalfe, right? Because the partner character wasn't that great. He was cool, but he wasn't that cool. And he seemed like he was kind of a jerk as well. Whereas like Theo Rossi, yeah, he's sinister, he's evil, but he's also like a lot of fun to watch. And knowing that he's going to lose at the end, you're just like, oh, like, and even when he does lose, it's kind of almost like his character, like the way his smile is when he loses, it's almost like, yeah, this movie couldn't handle me, right? Or like, yes, it's I this is the only way I could die in this one note film. So there was that as well. I think that that part of it too. I think, I don't know. Yeah, it almost made this one tougher. Again, you had the same pacing issues that you have in the other ones, right? So it's just like all this stuff happens in the first half hour, and you're like, okay, well, what are we doing for the next hour? Like, how are we gonna, and then it's like, oh, the main character is learning to shoot his gun again because he was, or he's rehabbing from his injuries in the hospital, and oh, he's gonna try to break out, he's gonna try to get out of the hospital, and oh, now he's getting the weapons, he's got to learn how to shoot again, and oh, now he goes to one of the gang, and there's this whole thing where he was like learning to, he was like practicing, his unholstering his weapon or something and pointing it and saying like, open or close, meaning do you want an open casket or a closed casket, and he delivers the line one time to some guy, and even that was a really bad one because it's like he beats up this really big guy in their gang, like just he shoots him a couple times, the guy's completely incapacitated and he's begging for an ambulance, and when by the time Clive Standon's character actually finally shoots him in the head, it's like he's so like the guy is so helpless that he's really, the main character is really punching down, and it really didn't work, right? We think of like the Punisher as a character who kills baddies, but he's usually not killing baddies in the sense that like they're begging, or maybe they're begging for mercy, but you know what I mean? Like a lot of times he's killing people who could have killed him, right? It's not like he's incapacitated them and then he's pointing a weapon at them and like, deciding what he's going to do or whatever. And it's like this whole thing. And I think also the Punisher's unique in that sense, right? That you can pull that off with him. When you have a hero killing a defenseless person, there is something about it that doesn't work right. And I understand that there's a point where they were trying to make the film kind of be like, these people are two sides of the same coin, right? That the hero is as bad as as the bad guy or something like that. Well, if that's the case, then why not let the bad guy win, right? In that case, why not go completely, nihilistic and just say, yeah, the hero loses, he dies in the end, and Theo Rossi rides off into the sunset as this baddie consolidates his power, and because Bruce Willis's character gets killed as well. Spoiler alert. So why not just go there? Why not just do that? So again, I think that would have been, yeah, I don't know. It at least would have been something different, right? I think that's the thing with these movies, and I do kind of wonder like who watches these and enjoys it, like who says like, man, I just need as many like white guys in baseball caps and beards grimacing and scowling and shooting people as I can possibly get. Like I just don't have enough of that in my daily life. I just need as many of those as possible. How many of these movies can I get? Flannel shirts make it even better. Yeah. Do they have a McMansion? Oh, fantastic. I want to see them talking to their wives at their islands with their beards and they're laughing about some bad joke and then kill the family off and they can grimace and scowl. I don't know. Like it just, and it might be again why these movies are starting to sort of dip in sort of the interactions they're getting. Is that enough people have seen it and they're just like, yeah, I've seen this enough times before. I don't really care. And I think that's another piece of it is that when you're making these movies, whether it's this or like even like a Seagal movie, right? I think the difference between the Seagal movies and these Bruce Willis movies is that, yeah, Bruce Willis is all over the cover, and the other person generally isn't, whether it's Byron Mann or who else am I thinking of? Bren Foster, somebody like that. Maybe they're not on the cover, right? Seagal's on the cover, and maybe that character's doing the heavy lifting. But at least we see Seagal enough. I think, that Sniper Special Ops one that he did with Fred Olen Ray might be one exception, right? Where it's mostly, Tim Abel in that film. And Seagal spends the entire film sitting right in the chair. But usually you get enough Seagal here and there. Even if it's bad Seagal, it's sprinkled in enough that we know that Seagal is the lead of the film. Whereas with these, Bruce Willis isn't even the lead of the movie. It's not even like they're trying to pretend that Bruce Willis is the lead and we're just going to sprinkle in these other characters and make you not realize that they're doing all the work, right? Bruce Willis is always a tangential character in these. He's not the hero. He's not the main character. And I think if that's the mindset that, okay, Bruce Willis is just going to be this guy who's in this film, he's the crime lot boss and he's mostly sitting behind a desk, except for when he goes with Theo Rossi to kill Clive Stanton's wife. When you're watching that, it's like, okay, well, so if Bruce Willis isn't going to be my hero, who is? Okay, so if it's going to be Clive Stanton, like what can we do to make him charismatic, make him fun to follow? Thomas Jane's character was more fun as the Machine Gun Joe kind of character. He was a lot of fun. For some reason, we had Mike Tyson in this. Made no sense, but we have Mike Tyson, and it looks like they used makeup to cover up his face tattoo, unless he got rid of that at some point. I didn't notice the face tattoo, but he's kind of there. And like they set up this big thing at the end where Theo Rossi and his gang, a couple guys in his gang, are chasing Clive Stanton and Thomas Jane. And, Mike Tyson's character runs a chop shop and he's got a whole bunch of people working there. And they make it sound like, oh, we're going to run to Mike Tyson's place. And that's when all the big guns are going to come out and they're going to take down Rossi and everybody. They kind of don't. It's Rossi's able to take them all out when they break through the doors and get in there. So it was kind of like, oh, they don't really turn the tide or anything. They didn't really help out or there wasn't. I mean, Mike Tyson gets killed off pretty easily by Theo Rossi's character, if I remember right. So it was just kind of a waste. It was why is that happening there? But I think with the hero, I mean, Clive Stanton, for example, he's originally from the UK. Maybe have him use his natural accent. Make him a little bit more interesting in that sense. I have to assume if he's been acting for a long time that he has a lot of natural charisma and it's probably a lot of fun to be around. Okay, make his character someone who's fun to be around. Make him not some kind of one note. I mean, how many times do we hear these characters in these movies who like they've got kids like, your mother makes the decision on that. I'm the dad. I don't make any decisions. It's like, whatever. Like, I don't care about that. Like, I don't know. It feels like you could do a little bit more with these than they're doing, and I think that would even mitigate the padding some. If the hero was somebody that we cared about and wanted to see, the padding wouldn't be so obnoxious or egregious that we're seeing in there. So I don't know. It's just kind of my thought there. The other thing about Vendetta, I think, beyond the other, as far as these movies go, this one I don't think even would have worked as an episode of a syndicated TV show. I think the other two definitely would have been episodes of a syndicated TV show. And again, I think if you put those with some of the other Willis ones and make those into syndicated TV show episodes, you'd actually have a pretty good season of a syndicated TV show. And I don't know how many times I can say syndicated TV show in a sentence, but anyway, but no, this one doesn't even work in that capacity. I don't think you could have even made that happen there. It's just, I don't know. It for a concept, it just was so kind of all over the place and kind of thrown together. And granted, a lot of these are thrown together. I think, again, when you've got someone like Theo Rossi, who's just so fantastic, I don't even know how he found his way into this movie. I don't know if he owed somebody a favor. I don't know if they offered him a lot of money. I don't know, because I know with the Emmett Furla productions, I know that they get a lot of big names like De Niro, Pacino, beyond just Bruce Willis, Cusack, people like that. They got, obviously they got Jamie King in the last film. So maybe that's part of how they can get a Theo Rossi, is that, maybe they pay him a lot of money. Maybe it's like, hey, you're already doing a movie down here. Why don't you come hang out with us for a little bit and make this movie for, in a matter of a few weeks or something like that. Maybe he thought the character was a lot of fun because he did seem to be having fun playing this bad character. I think almost like you want to wonder if the movie leans into that a bit, and I remember growing up reading was it the Chocolate Wars? I think it was the book where this character is like, his mom dies. I think this was the mom that passed in him, right? When he's going to his school and he's told by this like bully who runs the school that everybody's supposed to be selling chocolates, but the bully tells him he can't sell chocolates. And then he tells him now you're allowed to sell chocolates, and he still doesn't sell the chocolates, right? And he's sort of like trying to disrupt the universe. But what's interesting, right, is you have this kind of this bully, this main baddie character who wins in the end. And I remember when I read that, I was like, oh, I don't like that. I don't like that the baddie wins in the end. I want to see the baddie lose, right? But in a movie like this, maybe if you're going to go nihilistic, maybe that's the thing, because I think that's what happened with a lot of those. I can't remember the name of the author who wrote that book, but he would be a little bit more nihilistic. Like the baddies would win at the end. It wasn't like there was some sort of like resolution where anybody got their comeuppance. And I wonder if that might have been the way to go with this. But I mean, it's still, I don't know that it would have mitigated the padding. It would have mitigated the pacing issues that we had. That was like, I mean, the movie felt like it was over after the first half hour. It just, didn't make any sense that it was just sort of like dragging on with all of this. And so, yeah, I don't know. This one, I think if you're a Theo Rossi fan, like I am, I think you might enjoy this one just for that fact. And it is on Hulu. So you can check it out. But I mean, again, I think we're talking about a 90-minute movie that felt definitely longer. Another 96. Seems like 96 minutes is the number for them. They like 96 minutes. Hard Kill was 98 minutes. Okay, so that was a little bit further. But they like to get in that wheel. I don't know if you ever heard of Wesley Willis. We do these songs like Birdman Kick My Ass or something like that. And I guess he had heard that a single should be like 3 minutes and 20 seconds or something like that. And so whenever he would record his songs, he would make sure they were all in that number. So I don't know if maybe that's what Emmett Furla they're doing as well. Like, we get 96 minutes. Okay, that's perfect. 100 minutes. There are some that do get into that 105-minute range. And I stayed away from those for this because I knew 90 minutes was probably going to be my topper. And so that was the issue. I want to say it was Hard Kill, not this one, but Hard Kill that actually, this one, the other thing about this one ended right in the 96-minute mark. This didn't have a lot of credits to it. Whereas like Hard Kill, which you saw was 98 minutes, that had a good chunk of like 5 minutes worth of credit padding. So that's always like a different level of padding, right? And credit padding is like a little bit better, right? It's a little bit nicer than within the film padding, right? Because it's like, if I got to sit through people talking about crap that I don't want to hear about, that's going to really hurt my sensibilities. Whereas credit padding, right? It's like, oh wow, I'm out of this already. Like I'm done. It's almost like you're told when you're waiting on the phone, right? They're like, oh, estimated wait time 30 minutes. But then somebody gets to you at 25 minutes. It's like, hey, okay, that's not bad. That's kind of credit padding is almost like a nice thing. So I kind of appreciated that with Hard Kill. But yeah, this didn't have any of that. This was like a firm 96 minutes. And yeah, I think this one, this is the most recent of the ones that I watched, but it was also it was the first one that I watched because I was really excited to see what Theo Rossi was going to do in it, and it was the first one. It was the one that told me I was going to be in for it if I was going to really try to do this, and sure enough, yeah, I mean, Out of Death and Hard Kill were equal slogs to this one. This one, at least, it had different locations, so it wasn't like it wasn't like one location slog. So that was a little bit nicer that we got to go to different places, but it wasn't like we were going that many different places. I mean, it still, it still had a McMansion, which you got to have McMansions nowadays, I guess. That's another piece. It had a strip club. You got to have strip clubs in these movies, and a chop shop and a cheap motel. So it's not like it was really going that many different places, but at least it was more than one location. Whereas the other two, it was like, we're just going to set it here, just plop the movie down here and have at it. All right, so maybe kind of just to wrap up sort of the overall thoughts on this, I definitely think just the trend that I'm seeing on IMDb again is that they've sort of hit the law of diminishing returns. And I'm trying to see like how many Willis films we've got coming out here. I think it's going to be a good amount, I think. Yeah, I mean, I'm looking at 2021, I see like, I mean, it looks like he has 10 movies. He's doing them quite a huge chunk of films here. And one of the things too is I think there's this idea of like, well, Eric Roberts does that, right? Eric Roberts does tons of movies and he's in them. But there's something about these ones that feel a little bit different, where there's a sense that Willis's character is supposed to be a bigger deal in the film than he is. And I think that makes it a little bit more, I don't know if sinister is the right word. Cynical is probably the better word, right? That at least with Eric Roberts, we know that he's only going to be in the film for a couple scenes. It's like, okay, what is he doing? He's just sitting in the back of a van. Okay, that's fine. Or he's sitting behind a desk talking on the phone. Okay, that's fine. That's Eric Roberts. Whereas with these ones, you almost feel like you're supposed to get more from the Willis because of the way that they're sold to us. And to find out that that's not the case, and in some cases, at least with Eric Roberts, like you're getting Eric Roberts, right? In some cases, we're not even getting Bruce Willis, right? We're getting a fake Shemp that's sort of playing that part. So, I think that's the other piece of it. And I think it'll be interesting to see sort of what happens now that as he finally starts to step away. It looks like he's kind of got out as many as he can, and I don't know that he's doing any more at this point. And so then it's a matter of like, what do we do with these movies? I think for me, as someone who does direct-to-video films, I'm probably going to stay away from a lot of them. I'll probably review these three at least because it's all about, getting lemonade out of lemons. And so it's like I put myself through that. I'd like to get more than even just the podcast out of it. But I mean, again, the fact that you're seeing fewer critic reviews for some of these, I think is a huge sign that it's something where, fewer people are bothering with it. And I think that's, a sign that, we're all kind of getting there. And I think that's kind of what happened, right, with Steven Seagal as well, is that it hit that law of diminishing returns. I think Benjamin Sachs, who was on, kind of getting back to I Must Break This podcast, he was on I Must Break This podcast, and he talked about, Seagal would come to him sometimes 3 times a year saying like, hey, I need another movie. I need something else. And, Benjamin Sachs was able to see it. Like he could see it happening. Like, no, we're saturating the market. Like we can't expect to get this much money from another Seagal movie if we put 3 out in the same year. Whereas almost like, I guess, the Emmett Furla production model is their mindset is let's just pump out as many of these as we can, get as many other names as we can around Willis and just see what happens. Yeah, I don't know. I think that they've hit that point where maybe it's not, people have had it. People are no longer, that people aren't buying it anymore, and they're moving on to other things. The other thing too that I think is interesting to note is that a lot of classics or a lot of films from the 80s and 90s, where if we always think of the mid 80s to the mid 90s is really the golden age of direct to video action. And a lot of companies like Vinegar Syndrome, Arrow, Severin, they're putting out these films on DVD now, or even Blu-ray. And I think a lot of people who watch these kinds of movies, like me, they're more turning to that. Like, oh, you know what? Why do I want to watch this Bruce Willis movie when I don't know what I'm going to get, when I could just watch Strike Commando again and watch it on a Blu-ray and maybe check out some of the added features and things like that. And I think that could be something that also sort of turns this a bit. It'll be interesting to see. It'll be interesting to see, like, for example, with Dolph. Dolph has got more output coming. Scott Adkins still does 5 movies a year, but his 5 tend to have him in them more. But even with his, right, you think of Scott Adkins, like how many of his movies lately are he has a child that's kidnapped and he's forced into doing stuff he doesn't want to do, right? So, I think it's going to be interesting to see sort of where this goes from here. But I think even knowing that Bruce Willis was doing these because he was trying to, if that was the idea, was that he was trying to make them before he couldn't make movies anymore. He was trying to get as many in as he could. Even if that's the idea, I think for people watching them, they just can't, they can't manage it, right? It's too much. They probably oversaturated the market at this point. And, and I think for me, I'll probably review these few, but I'm not really going to feel an impetus to cover the rest of these, unless there's a name in them with them. But even in those cases, I don't really see people in these movies with him that are ones that we would want on the site, right? It's not like he's doing these with Dolph or with even like a Don the Dragon Wilson or a Cynthia Rothrock. He's doing them with people like Jesse Metcalf, right? And there's not really a lot of cry on the site for, hey, you're not doing enough Jesse Metcalf on your site, or you're not doing enough Clive Standen. Also, people aren't saying you're not doing enough Theo Rossi, which I hope that will start to come, right? Because I'm a huge Theo Rossi fan. But, there's not a lot of people clamoring for these movies. And I think that's probably something for me too. I mean, I don't know, we'll see, like when I start reviewing these, if they get the kind of, the kind of love that maybe a Dolph movie would get, or, even something like Killing American Style that I posted a couple weeks ago, Amir Sharban. And that's another thing too, is it's like, okay, you've seen Samurai Cop, you're on Tubi, and it's like you've got these Bruce Willis movies, but then you've also got these movies that Amir Sharban did. Maybe, you're more interested to check that out. I want to see another thing like Samurai Cop, because I just watched the last Bruce Willis movie and it didn't do anything for me. So why do I want to put myself through that again? So yeah, I think there's sort of that tipping point that we've hit, that the wave is crested on that. And yeah, I think it'll be kind of interesting. It'll be interesting to see kind of how the legacy goes with this, because I think also as the wave of these direct-to-video movies crests and recedes, people will start to come back to Willis's previous career. And I think that's ultimately what he'll be remembered for, is the stuff that he did in the 80s, 90s, and even into the 2000s. A lot of the classics. I think if you watch TNT in the late 90s, early 2000s with the whole New Classics thing, you were watching a lot of Bruce Willis movies, right? A lot of his movies were on in that time. He did a lot of films that really kind of stand out. And I think that's ultimately what he'll be remembered for, not these movies and these roles here. I think eventually these will kind of recede into history. Who knows? Maybe in 30 years, when who knows what streaming is going to look like then, what all that's going to, and maybe kids will rediscover these and get a kick out of them or something. I don't know. But I think now that he's kind of taking a break from making movies, I think it'd probably be good for all of us to have a break, right? From the sort of the low budget, Emmett Furlad produced Willis inundation that we were getting for so long. All right, so I think maybe it's time to wrap this up. I was able to get an hour's worth of chatting in about these 3 films. So good thing probably I didn't put myself through a 4th one, because I didn't need the 4th one to get an hour's worth of material out. So again, just some plugs here. Usually, right, I let my guests do the plugs, but because there's no guests here, I'll just kind of do the plugs myself. The site dtvconnoisseur.blogspot.com. That's where you can find sort of all the links to everything there. So social media, I think Twitter and Facebook are good ones. I don't use Instagram as much, but definitely Twitter and Facebook. Twitter is DTV Connoisseur, and then Facebook is Facebook/direct-to-video connoisseur. Those are places where generally, like whenever I post a blog post, I will put the links there. Whenever I post the a new podcast episode, those will go up. In terms of the podcast itself, right now, I know for sure iTunes and Spotify. It should be on Spotify because I'm going to be on Anchor, so it definitely should be there. And then I know, I'm pretty sure iTunes is still there. Supposedly, I'm supposed to get onto more places through Anchor. So I'm hoping like Google, I'm hoping Amazon, iHeartRadio. So I don't know if I'll get to the point where I can say all your major podcatchers, but I'm hoping that we get there. I think the easiest one is just to subscribe on iTunes. But if you listen through other channels, I'm hoping that we're going to be on more places than we were before. But of course, you can always reach out and let me know. Like, hey, I usually listen to my podcasts on this. Could you put it there? And so, considering what our audience is, it's not like we have a small audience. We have a good solid audience of people, but you'll probably be a high percentage of the audience if you request to be on a different service. So I'll be happy to help you out with that. And then like I said, we've got guests lined up for the next couple episodes. So who knows, the next time it will be a solo one like this. I'm always happy to hear feedback, what people think. If people would rather I skip a week than do a solo episode like this, I'm kind of happy to take that feedback. My mindset, of course, was I didn't want to lose a week's worth, or I didn't want to lose momentum and have people, expecting to have a podcast drop that doesn't happen. So there's that. Finally, of course, the novels, Chad in Accounting and A Girl and a Gun. Those are available on Amazon. Also links to those on the site. If you're interested in buying them, I would be plenty happy if you wanted to. Hoping to have the third novel, Holtman Arms, out soon. Hopefully by end of October. So you can look for that as well. You can buy the books on Kindle. You don't need to have a Kindle device. You can just get the app on your phone. About $5 to do it on Kindle, or of course paperback. Paperback is like $13 plus shipping. I think there's some shipping involved there as well. But either way, I'm always happy for the support and people that want to buy the books and read them. And hopefully we'll get that next one out as well. But it's a great way to support the site if you're interested in thinking about that kind of thing. Of course, I love any kind of support that we get from the site, whether it's retweeting, reblogging. Not on Tumblr anymore, so I guess you don't reblog, but retweeting, sharing or liking on Facebook, all of that kind of thing. I'm always appreciative of any of that. And and of course, any feedback that you have. Hey, check out this movie, or I'd like to do hear a podcast on this one, or that kind of thing. All right. Well, thank you everybody for listening, and we'll talk to you soon. Bye, everyone.
Director Leo, director